Welcome to Montessori Mindset, the podcast where we explore the ideas, people, and practices shaping the future of Montessori education and thoughtful parenting. I'm your host, Melissa Rohan, founder and head of school at Waterfront Academy in Washington, D.C. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Jennifer Daniels, founder of the Faithful Citizenship Institute. Jennifer's work focuses on forming young people to engaging thoughtfully with society, civic life, and culture through the lens of faith and virtue. At a time when conversations about education, citizenship, and the role of schools in forming the whole person are more important than ever, her work offers both practical guidance and a hopeful vision. In our conversation today, we'll talk about Jennifer's background and the path that led her to founding the Faithful Citizenship Institute. We'll also explore the mission behind the Institute, how it supports schools, families, and teachers, and why forming faithful citizens is such essential work today. We'll also talk on some of the broader conversations happening right now around education. So thank you, Jennifer, for joining me today.
Thanks, Melissa.
It's such a pleasure to see you. So for people who don't know, Jennifer and I have known each other for over 10 years now. And we keep running into each other. We used to be neighbors and we support each other in many ways. And then I started the school. And when I first started the school, Jennifer was very, very helpful in me starting the school. She had a lot of advice and a lot of thoughts. And I really appreciated all that guidance. And so I'm excited the last time I talked to her to learn about what she's doing. And I wanted, because I thought it would also be really helpful for everybody else since she's such a wealth of information. So can you tell everyone a little bit about your professional and personal background and how your earlier work and experiences are shaping what you're doing today?
Yeah, so I am originally from Texas and wanted to always work in education. That was my dream, to be in the education field. And I, however, kind of always knew that I wanted to work in some world of education policy or reform, as it was kind of called back in the 90s. And so I didn't know a lot about policy or politics. So I majored in education and started teaching in education. But then very soon it kind of transitioned into the politics world in Texas, which then led me to Washington, D.C. In the early 2000s. And I've been here ever since. And while I started on the House Education and Workforce Committee, it was my first job in Washington, I had a whole lot of jobs in politics from a variety of different perspectives. But it wasn't until I started at the Archdiocese of Washington in the Catholic Schools Office that I really came into my passion today, which is Catholic education, as well as school choice, which allows for families to choose the school of their choice. And I've been able to do that work at the Catholic Diocese here in Washington, and then transition to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, where I worked for the Committee on Catholic Education there, and was able to help advocate for the Washington, D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program, all the federal education programs that Catholic schools participate in across the country. And then fast forward to today, we now officially have a federal school choice program that is hopefully going to make school choice available for families in all 50 states.
This is so exciting. This is truly, truly so exciting. So before we get to talking about the school choice aspect of it, can you tell us a little bit about Faithful Citizenship Institute?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just celebrated our 2-year anniversary. I can't believe it's already been 2 years with this organization. And as you mentioned in the intro, our mission is to bring formation in Catholic social teaching to policy leaders at the state and the federal level who are Catholic, although we've had non-Catholics participate in our program, but want to bring the Catholic social teaching principles to their policy formation. And so it's not to be prescriptive in the policies themselves. We're not a think tank and we're not a lobbyist organization, but we want to form our leaders in these foundational principles, which then they can take to whichever policy area they work in, first leading with the human person and the dignity of the human person as the foundation to what we do, using subsidiarity and solidarity to design policy principles, and then ensuring that our final end result is to advance the common good. And so no matter where you work or in what field you work, those four principles can guide your work.
You're doing the work. So can you tell me, because you mentioned that most of your of the people that are participating are Catholic, but there were some non-Catholics. And these are our nation's leaders in policy making. Can you talk a little bit about the demographics? So are they coming from all 50 states? Are they the young right out of college, or are they more mature? Can you talk a little bit about the demographics a little bit?
Yeah, so our very first inaugural course is about to conclude this month. So it was a 7-month course, started back in the fall, and we have an incredibly diverse group. I like to say we're bipartisan, ecumenical, and represent all three branches of government. And they also are a diverse group in terms of where they are in their careers. We have some younger staffers, but we also have some very mature staffers. We've got lawyers, we've got think tankers, we've got administration, all of the above, and they all came with just such an open heart and an interest in learning more about their faith, and how they can bring their faith into their work. And so, thanks to my time at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, I also have a great relationship with Catholic conference directors across the country. And so we are hoping to bring this course to state level capitals as well and expand it all across the country in the years to come.
I love that. I love that. That is so important. Wow. And I love that you're reaching a lot of different people, because I feel that there's so much impact that can really affect the daily life of normal people that, yeah, like yes. And for instance, in school choice, so school choice, while it's a federal program, isn't necessarily being implemented in all the states. And so you would need to have somebody in the states understanding the program and being able to implement it so that Catholic families can participate at some level, right? So can you tell us a little bit about the school choice program that's coming and the big beautiful bill?
Yeah, so the name we're referring to this program is the Education Freedom Tax Credit.
Okay.
It was passed as a part of the big beautiful bill last July, that the Trump administration and Congress passed. It didn't really have a title in the legislation itself, so that's why we're referring to it as Education Freedom Tax Credit. And what it does is create a tax credit for donors to donate up to $1,700 of their tax liability to a scholarship granting organization. So it's an important distinction. It's not a tax credit for parents, but it's a tax credit for donors. And we currently have multiple states across the country that have a state version of this type of structure, this type of program. And so now we'll have a federal tax credit to complement any of the states that have a state tax credit version of this. So the donors donate the funds, get the tax credit. And then the scholarship granting organizations have a very flexible freedom within the legislation to design a eligibility structure that best meets the structure of their communities and to reach the families that they'd like to reach in their communities. And they also have the ability to work with different types of schools that are in their community. There's no top-down mandates or instructions also for the schools that participate. And so the legislation worked really hard to keep it as open-ended as possible so that those on the ground, so it's not being dictated by Washington, but the leaders on the ground, families, communities, donors, philanthropists, all of the above, can design a program that best meets the needs of the children in their community.
So I'm gonna tell you what I hear, and then you tell me if I got it right.
Okay.
So, in the bill, there is a part of it that specifically speaks to school choice, which is called the education tax
Freedom tax
freedom
credit.
tax credit.
Mm-hmm.
And donors, these are any donor?
Yeah, so the tax credit limit is $1,700, which is much lower than we initially were wanting. It is only for individuals, not for corporate tax credit or business tax credits. But yeah, so really anybody that has a tax liability, which is a pretty vast majority of Americans of that amount, can either choose to pay that tax to the government, or they can choose to make that donation to a scholarship granting organization. So it's really a win-win for all taxpayers out there.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Okay, so you've got a liability. You get to choose whether to pay it as tax or to put it into this fund. Then, then that money, the scholarship, where does it go?
So they will donate to a scholarship granting organization, and that can be, as you see in the states that already have these, we have scholarship granting organizations that are sometimes run by a community of schools. They might be run by a nonprofit organization. They might be run in the Catholic world in partnership with dioceses or Catholic conferences. And schools could come together to make a scholarship granting organization. The SGOs, as we call them, they have to work with more than one school. So you can't just have one SGO per school, but communities can come together. And all of those granting organizations then have the opportunity to set the eligibility parameters for who they're going to serve. So that could be geographical. We're only going to serve the Washington, D.C. area, or it could be statewide. Anybody that lives in Maryland could participate. Or they could say, we're going to give scholarships for schools within a certain community. So all of that is yet to be determined. Again, it's not laid out in the law. And now is the time for our schools and our parents and our communities to come together and say, what kind of scholarship granting organization do we want to build and create to meet the best needs of the students and families where we live?
But it has to be within the boundaries of a state. It could not be a national SGO.
Correct. So one additional line item that made it into this bill that was not a part of our original goal was that the governors actually have to opt in to participating in this tax credit. So each governor has to fill out a form. The IRS just established this form on their website in December. It's a brand new form. They fill out the form and they say, we would like to elect to participate. And then every year they will notify the IRS which SGOs are operating in their state. So the IRS knows that donations that are given to these named SGOs are going to be eligible for the tax credit.
So let's say there's a donation of $50,000, right? That's the pot. And it's distributed to, let's say, 50 states, because every amazing governor elects to do this, right? God willing.
And we're on our way. We're going to make it happen.
And so 50 states, $1,000 per state. And obviously, I'm just using simple numbers here just to illustrate. Then how is it distributed among the students?
So there won't be a big pot like that. Each pot, if you will, is held at that local level by the SGO. So all families would apply directly to the SGO, and they would the SGO would determine their eligibility. The SGO will also set the scholarship size. So there may be an SGO that wants to give larger amounts to allow for a larger amount of tuition to be covered for families. But then you might have a different SGO down the road that wants to serve, let's say, after school programs or a summer program. And so they may offer smaller scholarships because they're trying to target a different need. And then the other important thing is that this is not exclusively for private school tuition. This is not a voucher program, even though all of the opponents exclusively use the word voucher. This is 100% not a voucher. Vouchers are only allowed for private school tuition. This is open to students from all sectors, public school, private school, charter school, and it can be used for a wide range of eligible uses, not just tuition. So you could have students with disabilities apply to an SGO that is providing after school, additional learning opportunities. They could providing materials and resources for students with disabilities. Like I said, you could have smaller programs like after school programs, and there's a wide range of eligibility beyond tuition. And so again, those SGOs have the ability to design that and determine what the scholarship amount is and what the eligibility list is for the students in their community.
This is amazing. It's also very complicated. It's like a web a little bit. But I think that with putting together the right heads to kind of establish a plan and start implementing that plan to serve the communities across the 50 states, I think that is feasible. And you do have a little bit of a runway. Remind me again when all of this kind of needs to be done by.
Yeah, so the program doesn't officially take effect, or the tax credit is not eligible for tax donations until 2027. So we have all of 2026 to do several things that we need to do. One is first get the word out. So thank you for hosting this today, because we need to educate families, administrators, community leaders, faith-based organization leaders, pastors, all of the above, so that they understand the intricacies of the program and understand how it works. Then we have to ensure that we have the SGOs that are established in each of these communities that have to first raise the money and then determine how they're going to, structure the program for themselves. And then they have to get out there to get the word out about their own scholarship. Again, the families have to apply directly to those SGOs. So they have to find the families, recruit the families, receive applications, process the applications, and all of that. We won't be receiving the donations or processing applications till 2027, but all that has to be figured out and explained and communicated to the families, as soon as possible, so that when 2027 gets here, everybody is ready to go immediately.
So you said in 2027, they're going to be collecting the funds. So when would those funds be available for families to start participating?
So as soon as the SGO is able to receive the funds, they can then distribute the funds.
Okay.
So in 2027. So likely, realistically, perhaps maybe some summer programs could get started in 2027, but probably we'll see a lot of the biggest application for the fall of 2027.
That's exciting. That's really, really exciting. Now that we know about the education freedom tax credit, what are some other programs within school choice that Catholic families should be aware of?
Well, school choice has been expanding over the past, 30 years very quickly all over the country. There's been kind of an evolution of school choice that people should understand. We kind of started with the concept of a voucher. The very first school choice program in Wisconsin was a voucher, and also very tailored to a specific population. And over the years, school choice has evolved to provide more flexibility and also to reach more families. So fast forward to where we are today, we have the most popular program that's spreading across the country is actually called education savings accounts. And with these savings accounts, families have a lot more flexibility to use their account for a wide range of educational uses, which is much more similar to what this federal program does as well. And so we now have states across the country that have these education savings accounts, and not only are the programs themselves more flexible, but the eligible families are much wider. And in fact, in several, I forget the exact number, but several states, we have universal eligibility. That doesn't mean that there's enough funding for every single child, because there is usually less scholarships than there are children, but we have the eligibility for all students, as opposed to some of the more direct targeted programs that were originally the framework of school choice programs.
Yeah, I remember. So I think when we first met, I was already a school choice advocate, but but you're the one that told me about the savings accounts. That was something that you had told me about and put that on my radar. So I always appreciate our conversations because I always learn so much. Um, so moving forward, where do you think the education policy is going, or what's the hope?
Well, I mean, the hope is really for parents to be in the driver's seat of their child's education. COVID was very detrimental to our schools and our students in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, we've seen the negative impacts it's had on academic achievement of our students. But the silver lining of COVID was that parents got very heavily involved in their child's education, and they saw what was happening. They had to get involved when they were doing perhaps online learning at home, or some of the families created their own small pods or micro schools throughout the COVID time frame, and then they have stayed engaged and they've stayed involved. And so a huge number of states expanded school choice following COVID, and that has continued to be a theme in education, is that parents are learning more about education options out there. They're learning about different learning styles of their students, and then finding schools that meet the needs of their students. And so we are seeing that in all the sectors, public, private, and charter. Homeschooling has exploded since COVID, and it's really wonderful to see parents in the driver's seat, and we hope to bring more of that to parents.
I don't know if you saw the interview I did with Beth Blaufitz. She was one of my first interviews, and she was so gracious about it, and I really appreciate that. But she did talk about how exciting it was from her perspective as well, because she's seeing, especially, the school system was actually created by Catholics, right? The modern school system that we know is created in the U.S. by Catholics, and so to have now we're starting to see, she saw and I see as well, and you've mentioned you've seen seeing, excuse me, how it's becoming really very creative, and families they're saying, no, we want this, and this is how this is going to look, and so we're going to create this thing that mirrors our different values and expectations. And so we're seeing a lot of micro schools pop up, homeschools pop out. So kind of circling back to what we were talking about, SGOs, are they going to look at some of like the homeschooling and would that be eligible, homeschooling as well as micro schools and things like that? Would that be eligible?
So the homeschooling question is a bit open-ended at the moment, and we are one of the other bureaucratic items that's happening throughout 2026 is the Department the Department of Treasury, the IRS, is writing the rules and regulations for the implementation of this program. Homeschooling was not explicitly stated in the legislation, but it was also not explicitly excluded in the legislation. And so we are hoping that homeschoolers will be determined to be eligible by the IRS and the rules and regs. And then micro schools, it varies a little bit from state to state based on their classification by the state. But if they're considered to be a private school by their state, then they should be eligible to participate in the program.
All exciting, but also a little bit, it's not very, we can't see the future, obviously.
Right.
The future is not clear. So you, I think, participated in School Choice Week. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, we our one of our big programs got snowed out here in Washington, D.C.
Right.
But they had a hearing on Capitol Hill talking about expanding school choice here in Washington.
Oh, I really hope that happens. I really hope that happens. So for you, for the Faithful Citizenship Institute, I know you said that you're looking at doing other states and expanding your program. What else is on the horizon for you, or for the Institute, or for school choice? What are you seeing in the future?
Well, we have a new two things is our goal right now with Faithful Citizenship Institute. One is when I first launched the in-person course here in Washington, D.C., I actually got a lot of interest from people across the country that were wanting to register, not knowing that they had to be in Washington, D.C. And so we are working to create an online program so that we can have this course for anybody to sign up from wherever they live. And so we're hoping to partner with some online communities to do that. And then as we grow and as we build, what we really want to establish is a network of Catholic leaders in policy across the country. And so we want to offer ongoing faith formation, but also a community for them to find each other, to brainstorm together, to share model legislation or share talking points or just legislative strategy on how they're trying to implement their goals. And so we're going to be launching an online platform for collaboration and discussion and helping Catholic leaders out there find a community to work within. Many of the leaders that we worked with, they want to live their faith and they want to use their faith as a guiding post in their policy, but they're looking for some help and some support. And so we hope to provide that for them.
That is so important. I always felt, not always, I often feel like I'm working in a silo. I don't,
Right.
And I think that I often look across and I'm like, oh, well, they don't have to work in a silo. They get to work collaboratively. And how great would that be? Because one mind is great, but two is even better, right? And so having that opportunity to collaborate and work together so that not every person's working on their own and recreating wheels that might have already done. Maybe they've already faced policy questions before, or they thought ahead and saw something that I didn't see. So I think that is wonderful. What a gift you're giving to these members of yours. I look forward to seeing how that goes. Would it be like an app or what would that look like?
Yeah, it is going to be an app. We're working with the software community company right now. It's going to be called Fratelli, based on Pope Francis's document on fraternity. And so we hope to also have a place where people feel that they're working in a positive environment from that inspiration. And yeah, like you said, there's so many policy areas that move just consistently across the country. And so we're one piece of legislation that was a bad piece of legislation was fought down in one state, and then it might pop up in another state across the country. So, those Catholic leaders can learn from what happened, or, in a positive manner, if school choice passed in one state and they want to bring school choice to their state, how can they learn to do that as well? And so, many of these policy conversations are very cyclical across the country. And, just because it's arrived in your state doesn't mean it's the first time these conversations have been having. So hopefully they can learn from each other and build and grow from there.
This is kind of like a random question. It just occurred to me while you were saying this. What about the person who isn't necessarily political or really know all the nitty gritty that's involved in the policy making, but want to be to do their part, and help out where they can, write a letter or make a phone call or something like that? Are you looking at maybe engaging people like that?
Well, let me back up a little bit. The name of my institution, Faithful Citizenship Institution, comes from the bishop's document on Catholic engagement in politics, which is Forming Conscience for Faithful Citizenship. And that document, you can find it on my website or on the bishop's website. It provides Catholics with real good tools and resources, and also our obligations as Catholics to engage in the political debate and the political conversation. But throughout that, we also have guidance from the church on how to understand the policies from the framework of Catholic social teaching, and then also how to discern and how to think through some more difficult issues by forming our conscience through understanding Catholic social teaching, through prayer, through discernment, reading the scriptures. And in this way, Catholics can go to the polls or engage in a policy area not alone, but knowing that they have discerned what the church offers them. And then at the state level, we do have Catholic conferences in almost every state, and they are the representation for the bishops for state level policy. So if there's a question that's a specific question about specific policy at your state, they could give you some information, usually on their website, on what the bishop's position is. And then they also create action alerts, have sample emails or phone call scripts, things like that on their website when they are calling on Catholics to engage as well. So your state Catholic conference would be a good first step for any Catholic across the country.
I love that. Okay, thank you for that information. That's very, very helpful. Is there anything else that you'd like to add that I might have missed?
Well, I think this is really great what you're doing. Like I said, the most important thing over the next year is to educate our friends and our families about this bill. So I also work with the American Federation for Children, which is the country's largest advocacy organization for school choice, and they have just launched a new website, federalscholarships.com. And on that website, the bill is listed. You can read it. It's quite short because, like I said, there's very little mandates from Washington in this program. So it's very short. You can read it easily. There's also a printable PDF that if you're having a PTA meeting or a community meeting, or even for your church, you could pass out information about the how the program works. It's literally got like a flow chart showing step by step how it works. So it's really helpful. And then very importantly, there's a map of the United States on the homepage, which highlights in green all of the states whose governors have already opted into the program. So if your state is not green, it's a good time to engage and reach out to your state legislature and your governor to say, hey, we want the opportunity for school choice in our state. And please fill out the form and get us opted in to this program. The governors have until the end of the year to opt in. So the sooner the better, because the sooner they do it, the sooner SGOs can start ramping up and families can start knowing what the implementation is going to look like in their state.
This is so exciting. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. I really appreciate it. Can you tell our audience how to get a hold of you or to find out what you're doing with the Faithful Citizenship Institute?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is faithfulcitizenshipinstitute.org. And on there, there's an explanation of other workshops that we offer outside of the longer deep dive in Catholic social teaching. We offer workshops on the various elements of the Faithful Citizenship document. And we also have, can customize a program that best meets the needs of your organization or your group. So we'd be happy to work with you on that. And then you can also find key encyclicals on Catholic social teaching and key information there just for your own faith formation too. So we'd love to have you come and visit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I encourage everybody to. That, Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing your insights and for the important work you're doing through the Faithful Citizenship Institute, forming, well, I was going to say young adults, but it sounds like more than that, Americans in general, who can think clearly, act with virtue, and contribute meaningfully to their communities is truly vital work, and I am grateful you took the time to share your perspectives and guidance with us. And thank you to everyone listening to Montessori Mindset. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please consider sharing the episode with a friend, a fellow educator, or a parent who cares deeply about the formation of the next generation. You can find Montessori Mindset on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and FIO. So be sure to subscribe whenever you listen to podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, so you don't miss upcoming conversations. Until next time, keep nurturing curiosity, independence, and a thoughtful Montessori mindset.